then it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome and introduce to you Sofiya Filonenko from Lviv, where she is a professor of literature and literary theory at the Ukrainian Catholic University. And my name is Matthias Schwarz. I'm a scholar here at the Leibniz Center for Literary and Cultural Research and will moderate today's lecture. Sofiya Filonenko's lecture today is the final part of a public lecture series with researchers from Ukraine organized by the Leibniz Research Network Central and Eastern Europe in collaboration with the Science at Risk project at various Leibniz institutes across Germany. And I would like to express my sincere thanks, namely to Francis Seidel from the Science at Risk network for making today's event possible. Professor Sofiya Filonenko made a remarkable academic career. After studying Ukrainian literature, language and ethnology at the State Pedagogical University in Verdansk, she defended her first doctorate at the Oles Honsha National University of Dnipro, then Dnipropetrovsk, in 2003, which thesis dedicated to the concept of womanhood in Ukrainian prose of the 1990s from a feminist perspective. She then defended her second doctorate, which corresponds to the German habilitation, in 2013 at the Taras Shevchenko Institute for Literature at the National Academy of Science of Ukraine in Kiev, in which she dealt with the topic gender discourse and contemporary Ukrainian mass literature. At the same time, since completing her first grade in 1997, she has had different positions at the Pedagogical University in Verdansk, initially as a lecturer, and since 2016 as a professor in the Department for Foreign Literature and Literary Theory. From Verdansk, a large city on the Sea of Azov, about 80 kilometers west of Mariupol, she had to flee for political reasons immediately after the full-scale Russian invasion in February 2022, as she had been actively taking part in the so-called Revolution of Dignity, better known in Germany as the Euromaidan Revolution, and was on the Russian occupiers' persecution lists. She then fled to Lviv in western Ukraine, where she initially became a visiting professor and finally a full professor at the Department of Philology at the Catholic University in Lviv in September 2023. And one has to say the Catholic University in Lviv is one of the most prestigious, internationally prestigious universities in Ukraine, so this appointment alone is already a distinction. I will not mention all her many other positions and visiting professors. Among others, she is since 2022 an honorary professor at the Center for Transnational and Transcultural Studies at the University of Wolverhampton in the UK. But I have to say a few more words about her academic research. Since Sofiya Filonenko is, above all, an expert on popular literature, probably the most outstanding scholar in Ukraine on this topic, always maintaining a very broad comparative and theoretical perspective, especially in Anglo-American literature and theories. But she works also in other fields of literary history. So among her countless academic publications, so far she published, if I counted right, 8 books and some edited volumes. There are, for instance, textbooks on oral folk art and 2 introductory books on English literary history. In the field of her research on popular culture, I would like to name just 3 books. In 2011, her monograph, Mass Literature in Ukraine, Discourse, Gender, Genre, was published, which was then the first comprehensive academic work on this topic. In 2015, she was one of the authors of the collective monograph 100 Shades of Black, Urbanism in the Noir Style in Contemporary Mass Literature, and in 2017 followed a collection of essays under the title Mission Possible, Popular Literature in the Mirror of Criticism. In recent years, she has published extensively on theoretical and genre issues of popular literature, so she also presented, for instance, recently case studies on topics such as retrovisions in contemporary Ukrainian historical detective fiction or exoticizing representations of Mars and Venus in Ukrainian science fiction. In short, there's no better expert for today's topic than you. And I'm looking very much forward to your presentation on contemporary Ukrainian bestsellers, celebrities, trends, and readership. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Matthias, and dear friends. I'm very grateful to you for coming and listening to my presentation. And I'd like to say I'm very grateful to this institute for inviting me to speak today, and to the Science at Risk program. I appreciate very highly the support and solidarity of German academics and all the German people in our fight for the values of freedom, democracy, and respect for international law as a result of the bitter lessons learned from the two world wars. And in this struggle against the Russian aggression, we stand together on the side of good and truth, and this is very important to me, and it strengthens my hope that we will win this battle together, and will have better future and defend our Ukrainian independence and our European orientation. So thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm very honored to be here and to have this little talk. I won't repeat all that long list of my accomplishments like of the Jane Austen type Regency lady. I have this right to do this expertise in the field of popular fiction, as I have been observing its rise in Ukraine book market for over 20 years, and I'm a very ardent fan and a dedicated consumer of that sort of fiction, as if I got Agatha Christie and Jean-Christophe Granger and UNESCO, and even Georgia Moyes and Bridgerton, and up to Ukrainian names such as Maksky Druk and Illarion Pavliuk. I'll mention all of them today. And I'm also moderating the reading club or book club Bibliozaurs in our Ukrainian Catholic University, and we are very open. We have this reading community with the faculty and students and members of the Lviv community, and so I have this privilege to observe how they perceive the new releases of science fiction and fantasy genres and love stories, both foreign and Ukrainian ones. It's a real pleasure to have such support and such people around me. And I also have this privilege to teach the courses that are related to my research field, because I have such wonderful courses as from Sherlock Holmes to the Star Wars popular genres in literature and culture, then elementary detective genre in cinema and fiction, and women's bestsellers of the 20th and 21st century. So I'm communicating with my students all the time about popular fiction. It's very interesting, and of course I love the topic and can understand the perception of the popular fiction better. My topic today is contemporary Ukrainian bestsellers, celebrities, trends, and readership. A very typical reader in Ukraine nowadays. And we'll proceed to some points, some issues. We'll start with the development of the Ukrainian book market. I'll observe it for the last 30 plus years from the gaining of independence. And then we'll go to our bestsellers and popular culture, a little bit of theory, and then I'll speak about our first bestseller of the independent era. The Black Raven by Vasyl Shkliar is a vivid example of the action-adventure historical fiction. And then I'll review some very popular books, not bestsellers actually, but very popular, by Maksky Druk and Anastasia Levkova in science fiction genre and so-called Crimean novel. And I'll stop with the bestseller number 2 that is very popular today. I See You Are Interested in Darkness by our new literary celebrity Illarion Pavliuk. It's a bright example of the thriller genre. So I can recommend you some books and videos to the topic. The first one is my monograph that was mentioned by Matthias, and on the cover you can see there my native Berdansk market. That's not the book market, it's some fish stores, because we are on the sea. And we had that little store with second-hand books with that woman, Valentina Danilevna. I have no contact with her. I don't know if she's under occupation, if she's alive, but that's a real person. So I loved that analog between fish and books. It looks very interesting. And the two video programs, TV program Bookaholics, you know, that like Workaholics, Alcoholics, Bookaholics by Yevhen Stasinevich, and also his podcast together with Alexander Chirkov, Bestsellers, How Does It Work, the podcast Smell of the Word. You have the links and can also, if you know Ukrainian, you can watch the videos. And I'll like to present my theoretical framework because it is based on the ideas of Clive Bloom and John Sutherland mostly, and I also used some ideas from the books by Brian Hill and DePauer and S.T. Yoshi about the American bestsellers as a part of the popular culture. You can see the covers of the books on my slide. And so let's get started with the Ukrainian book market and with the date 1991, the date of our independence after the Soviet Union. And we had great changes because the state and the Communist Party, of course, didn't dominate the market, didn't control the book market, and the book from this date on became just a commodity, as in the capitalist world, and that was a process of commodification, and the author was not regarded as a national prophet, as we have Taras Shevchenko, Ivan Franko, and Lesya Ukrainka, they're on our banknotes, the great leaders, the top of our canon, but now the author is just a craftsman, a writer or rewriter, copywriter, so not a prophet. And we try to introduce new categories into the book market as fashion, trends, success, popularity, ratings, print runs and solds, demand, media resonance, and of course our main category as a bestseller. And most humanitarians understood the need of easy reading for the people, and the usual Ukrainian readers preferred such names as Stephen King, later J.K. Rowling, and Daniela Steele, and Barbara Cartland, and James Hadley Chase. And I don't want to mention Russian names, but in fact they were very incredibly popular in the 90s, in the early 21st century, as Boris Akunin, Alexandra Marinina, and Daria Donsova, all writing crime fiction of different subgenres, but they were very popular and they were real leaders. But now the situation has changed, and I'll give you some facts to prove that. So there was the idea of the import substitution, and it was questions if the native Ukrainian pulp fiction is necessary, or is it possible, because most of the literary critics of the late 90s thought that Ukrainian pulp fiction can't exist at all and we won't have our Ukrainian bestseller, never. So I can quote some pros and contras. I'll start with Oksana Zabushko, of course, as our great opinion maker. And in her interview given to Lyudmila Taran in the early 90s, I was lucky at the start, she told that we need not the voice of Taras, mentioning Taras Shevchenko, but a Ukrainian Stephen King. And it was a very helpful idea. And the other opinion maker of the 90s, Sofiya Pavliuk, told that it's necessary to start our popular culture and popular fiction. Popular entertainment culture is inevitable. She wrote this preface to readers about Andrei Kokotuha's debut because she was a member of the jury of the literary contest of Smolosky Publishing House, and Andrei Kokotuha's crime fiction or pulp fiction novel Frog Mating Games, you have this first cover on the slide, was the first example of that genre that was not perfect as 106th Enrico Cotuja's novel for today. The latest are better, much better. That was not perfect, but it was very significant for us to have this genre. And Sofiya Pavliuk understood that, and she helped Andriy to proceed and helped to develop his talent in this way, writing this preface to his novel and blessing him. But we had many contrasts, and I can also quote Nila Zborovska as one of our literary critics, and her article, Contemporary Popular Fiction in Ukraine as a General Cultural Problem, that was published in the academic journal Devaslova for all Ukrainian literary teachers. And she told that popular fiction and popular culture was like an imperial project, and I can quote, popular culture as an imperial project intends to deconstruct high culture and literature within the national project. So she was against. And then we'll come to the different problems, intra and extra problems of the Ukrainian book market of the 90s of the previous century and of the 2000 years. So we had very tiny, very little print runs of new releases, and in the 90s the print run of 3,000 copies was regarded as a huge success. Only 3,000 copies, it's impossible nowadays. And we had lack of bookstores and bookstore chains in Ukraine because, for example, in my Berdansk, it's a local center, a great seaport and resort. We had 0 bookstores in the late 90s, at the beginning of the 21st century, until some chains came to us at last. And of course, the book market suffered from the lack of investment as compared to the Russian book market, highly capitalized, and of piracy. That's our constant problem. And there was another problem of a very close and narrow circle of Ukrainian-speaking public who could read the new releases. And we all knew each other, in fact, all writers knew the readers, but nowadays the situation changed a lot. The new releases were invisible for the Ukrainian media. There was no publicity, no some autograph sessions, meetings with the authors, and there were some inner problems because the new books and the newborn genre fiction was often not readable, and it was imitative as compared to the Western models, to Stephen King, for example, and Agatha Christie, and even our critics were not prepared to value such genres, and they didn't know the tradition of the Ukrainian genre fiction, but we had that tradition. And here I want to mention the name of my true friend, Yarina Tsimbal, who is a well-known literary critic in Ukraine, and she did a huge project with the Tempora Publishing House, and they published some dozen of anthologies, so-called Our 20s. Yarina coined the term instead of the executed Renaissance, the tome of Yuri Lavrinenko, or the Red Renaissance by Latest. And Yarina's tome is now very popular, and that was a concept of speaking about the genre fiction without that tragic tones. And you see some examples of those anthologies as Short on the Stairs, the crime fiction of the 20s, later Belladonna love stories, but all written by men, not women, and Atom in Harness, Atom у запряжье, that's science fiction of the 20s, but we have more genre fiction of the 20s, and we rediscovered this tradition later, not in the 90s, of course, but later in the 2010s. So. And let's return to the 90s and to the early 2000 years. Many critics told that it was just impossible to produce Ukrainian bestseller. They were so pessimistic, as, for example, Natalka Belocerkivets. It's simply impossible today to do the bestseller. Later, literary critic Yevhen Baran who told also the principle of a bestseller is impossible in Ukraine. And very famous essayist Mykola Repchuk, the emergence of a Ukrainian Agatha Christie is fundamentally impossible for the simple reason that works of popular culture are written primarily for earnings, not for the soul or any other high purpose. So he told us that we couldn't have this mass production of the books. So everything changed in the new century, and now we have that developed infrastructure. So you see, many of the critics were so pessimistic, but I was maybe the only optimist in those times because I was writing my doctoral dissertation, and I thought I believed in capitalism and in development of book market, and everything changed. And now I have this slide. I tried to put the new items on it, and I have so little space now. And not all our publishing houses are mentioned, only those ones who have these lines of popular fiction series and who are publishing bestsellers. And we also have book chains, especially Bookstore Year, this one, and Bookstore KSD, Family Leisure Club in Ukrainian. That was a book catalog first, and later they became a bookstore chain. And our publishing houses now produce the books as to the principle of serial publishing. So we have these usual book series of different genres, as you can see on the slide. And of course, we have the wide network of literary festivals and book fairs since the 2010s, as in Lviv, in Kiev, and now we have up to 10, and they continue to be run even in the wartime, and I think it's a great sign of our resilience in Ukrainian culture. And we even have this wonderful bestseller fair that has been organized this year for the first time by the Old Lev publishing house, Видавництво Старого Лева, led by Mariana Savka. You can see Mariana here on the slide, speaking to Illarion Pavliuk, our new celebrity. And a lot of writers came to this fest in Lviv, and a lot of readers, as you see, standing in the quay and waiting to come in and have these meetings with the authors, and as Yuri Andruchovich on the top. Of course, that Bestseller Fest, that's a very catchy title, but that was not only about the popular fiction genres, but about literature as a success, literature as a fashion, trendy Ukrainian literature, and that's why that was very interesting and effective. And now we have a lot of literary contests, and I can mention that the one title that is very dear to me, because I was heading the jury for many years of this contest, Coronation of the Word, that was founded by the couple Tatiana and Yuri Logosh in such time as 2000 years, so we are celebrating 25 years of this contest now, and it was a contest for the manuscripts, not for the published books, and it was aimed to rediscover, to find the next Ukrainian bestseller, as we read in the guidelines for the jury members. So we are searching for the new bestseller among all the manuscripts, and each year over 3,000 manuscripts only in the novel category, sometimes by the novice writers, sometimes by the established authors. And here you see Bogdan Kolomychuk, who is a sergeant of Ukrainian army, who won this contest in 2020 for his novel Ludvissar. That's a historical fiction. And we also have this wonderful media resonance on different Ukrainian sites where they publish criticism, where they publish literary reviews of popular genres. In Ukraine, we don't have these journals in usual form, but most our criticism live on media, live on internet, and they're very popular as Bukvoid and Sensor Media and Tiktor Media. and Barabuka for children's fiction, and so on and so forth. And of course, I can also mention this connection between the book market and the Ukrainian cinema, our new movies, because some movies are adaptations of the Ukrainian popular fiction, as you can see the Sentry Post and Chervony, based on the novel by Andriy Kokotyuha, Sentry Post by Volodymyr Rudkivsky, TV series Kava с Кардаmoном, Coffee with Cardamom, based on the novel by Natalia Hurnicka, and TV series The Age of Jacob, Stolitya Yakova, based on the novel by Volodymyr Lis, and Pozivny Banderas, that's a spy fiction movie, Call Sign Banderas, and we have now even novelization, the book that was based on the film. That's a very interesting fact in Ukraine. It's one of the very rare examples of such type. And let's proceed to the readership. I promised to tell you what happened to the readers along the years, and we have some sociological surveys made by different agencies and sometimes by Ukrainian Book Institute in Kiev over the last 5 years, and they showed a very rapid increase in the number of readers of Ukrainian language products, especially since the time of full-scale invasion. And we have these wonderful numbers. You see the red one, the books in Ukrainian, 26, 24, then 32, but later we have better numbers. You see 57 in 2023 and 76 in the last year, 2024. So we have this wonderful graphic chart to see that the amount of Ukrainian speaking readers was increasing, and then I can rely upon the other report, the other survey of the reading level of children and adults that was made in 2024 by Ukrainian Book Institute, and we have this amount of 76% of the Ukrainian readers among all the citizens. Only that last part, 34, people who don't read at all. So we must engage them in the reading process. That's our potential, but 66% are reading from time to time, maybe not every day, but they are reading, and that's very good, I guess. And please look at this wonderful graph. So we have two graph lines. The darker is for males, and the lighter is for female public. Which genres do we prefer? So Ukrainians, as all people all over the world, prefer to read detective stories or crime fiction, 41%, then historical fiction, because we are Ukrainians, we love to read about history, 36%, and you know that the two graphs coincide in these points, so both male and female readers read detective stories and historical fiction, but then the third one is romance novels, and of course female public is more broad than the male one. So let's speak a little bit about the issues of literary theory, and I'd like to have this definition of the bestseller as a literary work that enjoys the greatest demand among readers, has extremely high sales, and is represented in the information space. So we speak not of the good sales, but of the best sales, the incredibly good sales, extremely high sales. And I also rely upon Clive Bloom's idea that the bestseller is a book which enjoys phenomenal sales and over a very short period of time. So it's also about time of sales. And John Sutherland proves that bestsellers are books of the day and for the day only. Read them while you may, and then toss them away. So bestsellers live like butterflies for some seconds, but I also rely upon the ideas of Clive Bloom and John Sutherland that bestsellers are a part of a very significant part of the popular culture, and to analyze the phenomena of bestseller we have to use different ideas and concepts both of literary studies and culture studies. So I also can mention the introduction to the wonderful collection Cambridge Companion to Popular Fiction, edited by David Glover and Scott McCracken, and they tell about their definition of popular fiction and explain popular fiction as those books that everyone reads, usually imagined as a league table of bestsellers. So they equal the bestsellers and the popular fiction, and of course mention the remarkable commercial success of such type of the books. And so I'll have to share some ideas about the Ukrainian popular culture. And of course we have now, even in wartime, and on the slide you can see the pictures of our best known and very popular pop stars, the seen as pop stars like Jerry Hale, she was the Eurovision star once, and the newborn project Claudia Petrivna, that I like very much, and Artem Pivovarov, who has also a phenomenal success, and they are very popular among the young Ukrainians. And so we have this phenomena of popularity and success of the Ukrainian popular culture, and we also have the phenomena of success of the Ukrainian literature. A little example, in 2024 at Kiev Book Fest, the presentation of Illarion Pavliuk's new novel, I see you're interested in darkness, generated enormous interest among the readers, and the huge hall couldn't accommodate all those who wished to see Illarion Pavliuk, and that was fantastic for the Ukrainian literary culture, and I understood that the new celebrity, the new literary star was born at that time. And Illarion Pavliuk is an emerging author. I'll tell you about him a little bit later. So, what about the statistical measure of the bestsellers? How many copies should be sold to gain this status? So I have this wonderful formula by Frank Luther Mott from the USA. The total sales must equal 1% of the US population in the decade it was published. 1% of the population, but the decade is not it's not used today because the bestsellers live a smaller time, not a decade. That was written in 1949, and everything changed since the time. But what about Ukraine? We don't know even how many people live in Ukraine now, because you know many of people live here, for example, in Berlin and in other countries. We have a lot of refugees and migrants, and many people were unfortunately killed at the front line, and even the civilians. And so maybe we have some 30 millions. We don't know exactly, but you know, the amount of 300,000 copies can be regarded as a bestseller phenomenon in Ukraine. But sometimes our literary reviewers and the leaders of the publishing houses mention the amount of 100,000 copies to become a bestseller, and they say that it is enough. What about the charts? You know that all over the world the New York Times bestseller lists are trusted most, and you can visit the site. That's the latest information for now. But what about the Ukrainian situation? In Ukraine, there are no nationwide book sales ranking, and accounting is carried out by various state institutions, and as, for example, Ukrainian Book Institute, and by different marketplaces and book websites. You see the charts on this BookVoid site, and also we have Yekabu as a marketplace. It's a very powerful book marketplace, can be compared to the Amazon, and it has its own book ranking there. And the bookstore chain here that operates nationwide across Ukraine traditionally determines its top-selling titles, and they use this term bestsellers, but of course this label is a sort of a marketing tool, as in this for example, in this example, 1 + 1 is 3 for the bestsellers. But I saw those bestsellers, not all of them were real bestsellers. That was only marketing. And just before my visit to Berlin, I came into the bookstore here that is on the Mickiewicz Square in the very center of Berlin, where I live. And I saw all these shelves with the books. As you see, Colin Hoover, as in Berlin as well, and some other very famous titles, Rebecca Kwan, fantasy, fiction, and others. And the most popular were The Ladder by Evgenia Kuznetsova, The Colony by Max Kidruk, The Dances with the Bones by Andrei Semyankov, the Easter Classics, that's a Vivat Publishing House series. And also, maybe you know this photo, that's General Zaluzhny, and his memoirs, My War, that are also in the list of the bookstore here, bestsellers. And yesterday I went to the Dussmann Das Kulturkaufhaus in Berlin, in Friedrichstraße. I loved that book Paradise in many stores, and also that vibe of Christmas there, and that lovely stand with Jane Austen gifts for Christmas, because I'm also a fan of Jane Austen. And I saw some titles of the bestsellers in belletristic, and saw, for example, the latest novel by Robert Helbraith, that you know, the pen name of J.K. Rowling. I love her series about Cormoran Strike. So we have just the similar items, the similar titles in Ukraine, but of course only 2 shelves in the international bookstore in this Dussmann were about Ukrainian literature in Ukrainian, not in translations. So let's go to the historical dimension, and I'd like to speak about our first Ukrainian bestseller of the 20th century. That was a science fiction novel, The Dystopia, The Sun Machine by Volodymyr Vinnychenko, who was not only a writer, but of course a political leader and the first prime minister of the Ukrainian People's Republic in the 20s. And that novel had huge success. We don't have the amounts, the book sales, but it was praised by the 2 most authoritative critics of the time, by Mykola Zerov and Alexander Beletsky, and they told about that huge success of the novel. The first edition, then in the center, the edition of the 90s, I read this in my students' time, and the latest edition nowadays. Then there's a problem if we do have the Soviet Ukrainian bestsellers, because you know that the book market, we didn't have the market, in fact, we were a socialist state, and it was controlled, the book production was controlled by the Communist Party and the Soviet government, and maybe the largest print runs belonged to the Lenin's 50 volumes collection that was in every library. We didn't read the collection, but it was like a ritual to have these volumes everywhere. But there were popular books, and people preferred to read also science fiction, as The Argonauts of the Universe by Volodymyr Blatko, spy fiction novels like by Yuri Dold-Mikhailek, One Man War, I Один у полі воїн, and historical romances by Pavlo Zagrebelny as Roxolana, famous Roxolana. So that was the real choice of the people, but we didn't have the amounts as in New York Times charts, so we can speak of the real Soviet bestsellers only with these punctuation marks. So what about the 90s? Since the time of the independence, we had also popular books, though there was a great crisis on the book market, and we have these popular items by Yuri Andrukhovich, The Perversion, by Oksana Zabushka, Field Research in the Ukrainian Sex, Elemental by Vasyl Shkliar, that was a true contender, candidate for the status of bestseller, but with a print run of 3,000 copies. Of course, we can speak. It's a type of Ukrainian James Bond story. And the novel by Lina Kostenko, The Notes of the Ukrainian Wanderer, So very popular, but not bestsellers. And the miracle happened in 2009 when The Black Raven by Vasyl Shkliar, we have the other title of the book in Ukrainian, Zalishenets, the one who remained, and in English we have this translation as Raven's Way. It was sold as 300,000 copies. And Oksana Zabushko blessed this publication, and she wrote in her interview about its huge success, and she told that at last we have acquired popular fiction since this novel had been printed. And she appreciated its educational contents and success, and she praised the perspective of forming Ukrainian identity in this novel and the problem of historical memory. So that was a good sign for us all, and that was a real success of the Ukrainian bestseller. The Black Raven, Chorny Voron, was based on the non-fictional books. It's a documentary tale by the real participant of those events of the rebellion in Holodny Yar in Kiev region by Yuri Gorlys-Gorsky. You see the photo, and the first edition made in Lviv in the 30s and the later edition of the 90s. But it was known only in a very close circle of the readers, not for everyone. And the historical fact of this rebellion in Holodny Yar against the communists, the Bolsheviks in the 20s was unknown. But after Vasyl Shkliar's fictional tale, fictional novel, that became well known, and we have these literary tours to the Holodny Yar with its forests, Cossack and Haidamaks, memorial signs, monuments, and this black and white flag by Holodny Yar. And also one of our military brigades is named after Holodny Yar, and it's the good connection between our Ukrainian history and our Ukrainian present times. And why was this success made by Vasyl Shkliar? We have very different explanations. Maybe some of them are about the quality of this text, because it has an intrigue, dynamic plotting. It's about genre, historical action adventure, and it's a type of the Eastern as an analog to the Western pattern, the Western. And we have this figure of a Superman, of the Black Raven, Otaman in Ukrainian, who leads the rebellion, and the very idea of the struggle against Russians and against the communists, and this wonderful setting in the center, in the heart of Ukraine, in Holodny Yar, connected to the Cossack and Haidamak traditions, and it was praised by our national poet, Prophet Taras Shevchenko, and some mysteries in the plotting, like a witch, femme fatale, a 3-year-old bird, also Black Raven. All that is very, very influential, but the main secret was a political scandal, and it was very typical for Ukraine of the 21st century, because Vasyl Shkliar refused to get the National Shevchenko Prize in 2011. For the time when Ukrainophobe Dmytro Tabachnik, the former Minister of Education in Ukraine in the Yanukovych government, hold that position, and that's why Yanukovych didn't sign the document about this prize. He signed, but without Vasyl Shkliar. And there was another project when all people, and my family as well, gathered money to give this prize to Vasyl Shkliar, and that was called People's Shevchenko Prize, and he was awarded in Holodny Yar, the location of his novel. It was it had media resonance. So the political scandal was the main key to the success of that novel. Though it's very interesting. In fact, we study this novel in our course of contemporary literature in our Catholic university. And later we had this adaptation. It was a very long-running project, and no one believed in its success because there were many scripts, many tries. But you see, when 3 Tarases gathered together, Taras Tkachenko, the film director and producer, Taras Antipovich, the screenwriter, and of course our film star Taras Cymbaluk in the role of Black Raven. Taras is a very significant name for the Ukrainians. Taras Shevchenko is our greatest poet. So the project was realized, and we have this wonderful adaptation. It's not just after the plotting of the novel, but it's interesting, and it's in Hollywood type maybe of the historical movies. And of course it's about the trend of historical fiction now, and our historical adventures are really very successful and popular because of our Ukrainian reading traditions. We have this huge tradition, very powerful tradition of Ukrainian historical fiction, as for example, Zahar Berkut by Ivan Franko, that is in school curriculum. And we have these influences of the Western models and Western trends, because if all over the world people love the Tudors or watch series about Borgias, the Ukrainians also love to watch such TV series, and this makes the history very trendy. And in parallel, we can speak about the development of history as a science, and our scholars fill the blank spots of the Ukrainian history, and they also produce their works in this trend of decolonization of the Ukrainian history. And maybe we can also mention the contemporary geopolitical challenges, because we are in search of our identity in the wartime, and we need the new myths, and we need the new heroes. That's why we love to read and to speak about history. I can show you some examples of the latest Ukrainian historical research books, as maybe you know Sergei Plokhy most of all, and Yaroslav Gricak, and Oksana Kis, and Volodymyr Vyatrovich. And this particular book by Vakhtang Kipiani, the Case of Vasyl Stus, that is also a bestseller, but in the non-fictional field, and that was also about the political scandal with Viktor Medvedchuk, a very powerful figure in the times of Kuchma and Yanukovych, but later we all wanted to hurt Medvedchuk, and that's why we bought this book about Vasyl Stus, because Medvedchuk played his very negative role in his political process in the 70s and early 80s. So the historical fiction is also mentioned in our different ratings, especially the ratings that were in the times of the 30th anniversary of our independence. There are 3 links to different surveys, to different ratings, and in the first one, made by the Ukrainian Book Institute, you see in the first 10 items, 5 of them are about history in fictional and non-fictional forms, but that's about history. So it's really very popular. And we can also speak about the Ukrainian historical cinema, because we have some new movies from Zahar Berkut by Artem Seitablayev to Slovo House, unfinished novel, and Dovbush by Oles Sanin, and many others. They are different in quality, but they are the events of the Ukrainian cinema life. And The Black Raven by Vasyl Shkliar created this trend for the action adventure in Ukrainian popular fiction, and I can only show you these slides with different novels by Vasyl Shkliar, Andrei Kokotyuha, Viktor Wald, and also by Bogdan Kolomeychuk and Petro Lushik, and in children's fiction, Volodymyr Rudkivsky and the Century Post that was adapted to screen by Volodymyr Rudkivsky is a very famous book for children, and also a movie. And I can also mention that Ukrainian writers rediscover the Western history. And one of the most popular books of the later years was The Son of the Open Road by Artem Chekh, who is in the army. And it's about the war, but not the present war, about the US Civil War in the 60s of the 19th century. It's a time of Gone with the Wind, you know, but different genre. And it's very interesting to read, and everybody asked the writer why didn't he write about his actual experience, because he is at the front line, but he wanted to write about the American war experience for the civilian person. And I'd like to speak about, very briefly, about two very popular books. They can't be regarded as the bestsellers, but in fact they have very good sales as science fiction novel and climate fiction novel, The Colony in New Dark Ages by Max Kidruk, and the novel There's a Land Behind the Perikop, so-called Crimean novel by Anastasia Levkova. So Max Kidruk made his novel a success, and that was for the first time when the science fiction novel was so successful in Ukraine. And this book is really very great. It has 904 pages, and it's of this huge format. It's very difficult to hold it, to carry it in the hands when reading. And to publish this book, Max Kidruk, in December of the 22nd year, that was wartime, he founded his publishing house, the Bearded Tamarin, Borodatый Tamarin. And that was very interesting fact, because the new publishing houses appear in wartime, and that was about our optimism. He started with his travelogues in the early 2010s, but then he shifted to Michael Crichton-like or Stephen King-like books, like techno-thrillers, you know, like the Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, something like that, and he was very successful. And later he shifted to the science fiction novels, and his Colony was inspired by the two sagas, like of Kim Stanley Robinson. Maybe you know about his Martian saga, Red Mars, Green Mars, and Blue Mars, and the very interesting project by James S.A. Corey, the two authors under this pen name, The Expanse, and the Amazon TV series, The Expanse. And that was the inspiration for Max Kidruk. And he explained why the New Dark Ages in this way, the future into which humanity was entering. Darkness loomed from everywhere, and no one didn't know what was waiting for them. And Kidruk depicted the Martian planetscape, and he included the Ukrainian colonies on Mars surface, and that were very influential. The action takes place 100 years in 2100s, and Ukraine still exists, but Russia still exists as well. It's a point for criticism of Max Kidruk, why Russians are on Mars. And he developed the theme of the ecological catastrophe on the Earth and the climate crisis, and it's very trendy. In fact, we can think of the climate fiction like of Paolo Bacigalupi, The Wind Up Girl, if you know, Robert Jackson Bennett, The Tainted Cap, and many other items of this trending climate fiction. And maybe that's why it is so interesting for the younger readers. And now he produced the boarding game after the novel The Colony in September of 2025, and some days ago on November the 13th, Max Kidruk announced on social media that he had finished writing the second novel of the series, with very optimistic title, The Collapse, and that it would be released in February 2026. Yesterday he announced and opened the pre-sales for this book, and we are all waiting to read the next 904 pages of the same format, but it's really interesting because it's top stopped with some plot twists, and we wanted to know what happened after that. And the other novel that is also very popular, also in our students' curriculum, There's a Land Behind the Perikop by Anastasia Levkova. Perikop is the point dividing the Crimea from the other part of Ukraine, and it's about the search of Ukrainian identity by Russian heroine. She's anonymous most part of the book. And you know, Anastasia organized the wonderful contest and festival of the Crimean Tatar literature, Krymsky Injir, the Crimean fig, and it annually culminates in the publication of the anthology of texts in two languages, both Ukrainian and in Crimean Tatars. You know, they're changing to Latin graphics now from Cyrillic, and the theme of the tragedy and the deportation of the Crimean Tatars in 1944, and this great Stalinist crime, is very important in the actual Ukrainian culture and literature and cinema and music. Maybe you remember Jamala's entry at Eurovision with her son 1944 and all the symbolism of her performance. And I also can mention to review, to observe the field of this theme, the films by the director and actor Artem Seitablayev, also in Ukrainian army now, Khaitarma and Chuzha Molitva, another Spreya, that were dedicated to the tragedy and told about the rescue of Jewish children by the Crimean Tatar teacher Saideh Arifa, a real person. And also the novel by Irene Rozdobudko, Farideh, that won the grand prize at the coronation of the world contest in 2021. And another popular book by Svetlana Taratorina, who chose the genre of post-apocalypse and post-nuclear world in her novel Dim Soli, The House of Salt, that was published in 2022, also to describe the tragedy, the present tragedy, the actual tragedy of the Crimea. So we have a lot of non-fictional books about the present situation in the Crimea by Taras Berezovets, The Annexation, The Island of Crimea, Chronicles of the Hybrid War, and Natalka Humenyuk, The Lost Talent, a book of reports from occupied Crimea, and many, many others. Only two examples of the topic. And I can't but mention Lily Hyde's novel, A Dreamed Land, that was published in English in 2008 and that translated into Ukrainian in 2014, Jak Omriyaný Kraj, that's also about the deportation of the Crimean Tatars and when they return to their native land in the 90s. So all that form the context for Anastasia Levkova's novel, There's a Land Behind the Perikop, and maybe it is so popular just because the topic is recognizable and it's very interesting for the Ukrainian readers. And at last we came to Illarion Pavliuk, our newborn Ukrainian literary celebrity, who is a famous journalist, TV producer, and for some time he was at the front line, and then he worked for the Ministry of Defense, organizing the communication process. So he's in the army nowadays, and he was well known for his documentary films like DNA, The Portrait of the Nation. He used sensational hot themes that were popular among the Ukrainian viewers. And his 3 and now 4 novels, I have read only 3 of them, like The White Ash, The Dance of the Idiot, and this bestseller, I See You're Interested in Darkness. And the Book of Emil is the newest release. I didn't have the opportunity to read it by now, but of course I'm looking forward to read his 4th book. And when speaking about Illarion Pavliuk's bestseller, I See You're Interested in Darkness, I should mention 2 main facts. Actually, it was written in Russian, but never published in Russian. And it was translated into Ukrainian, and there's a discussion if we can regard the book as a fact of the Ukrainian literature. But we have no Russian edition, we have no Russian manuscript published, so that's only a Ukrainian book, and of course Pavliuk tells that he's a Ukrainian writer, but it was translated. In genre, it's a maniac thriller, very popular genre all over the world, and the protagonist is Andrei Geister, a crime psychologist and a profiler with the Afghanistan background, and we have this wonderful character of little girl Nadika. She has mental disability, and that's why this book is an example of the inclusive fiction that is also an emergent trend in Ukraine. And you see some examples of this inclusive fiction over the last 10 years, both in adult literature and in the children's literature. It's a new trend on Ukrainian book market, but it has its media resonance. And also thriller is an established genre in the Ukrainian fiction. We have a lot of different thrillers by Mark Skidruk, Andriy Semyankiv, Andriy Kukutyuha, Victoria Hranetska, Polina Kulakova, Andriy Volkov, and many, many, many others. And I think that Pavliuk's novel resembles the fiction of Dan Brown with its pseudo-intellectualism, because he used a lot of allusions to Bosх, the Garden of Earthly Delights, and to Dante, his Divina Commedia, and also to ancient mythology. And readers loved all that puzzles. And its popularity, the popularity of this novel, can be explained by its thriller genre and also the dynamic plotting with many plot twists about paranormal elements and regional social trends as an inclusion. And also we can explain its popularity by the allusions to the highbrow culture as Bosch and Dante, and richness in intertextuality that provided food for thought for readers, younger and elder readers, like the intellectual games for them. And of course, because of the philosophical issues, the duality of the personality, the split of the personality into good and evil, as for the thrillers, the problem of the violence, of the evil, that are very resonant in the Ukrainian society. And we even have the theatrical version of this novel produced by Maxim Holenko. I never happened to visit this performance because it's sold out, total sold out. Only one person at our department, Oksana Levitska, had this opportunity to buy the tickets and to visit, because it's a really great success, and we have no tickets, but I hope that someday I will come and see this performance, this show. So let's come to the conclusions, and I can say that over the 34 years of our Ukrainian independence, the Ukrainian book market has developed its numerous trends and genres and niches, and its infrastructure has taken shape. And genre fiction has its own success stories, like of Mark Skidruk and Vasyl Shkliar and Illarion Pavliuk, and the interaction between the readers and the authors has improved, and number of readers focusing on Ukrainian language books has significantly increased. Reading in Ukrainian has become fashionable and trendy among the young people. And due to the war, the Ukrainians are rediscovering our national identity, national history, art, literature, our traditions, and this is becoming a resource for resistance against Russian aggression. Despite wartime problems, the physical destruction of printing houses, as in Kharkiv, for example, and the libraries, and the economic difficulties, the book industry in Ukraine demonstrates amazing adaptability and is forming new structures and new institutions. It is noteworthy that Ukrainian bestsellers are becoming symbols of resistance. For instance, Shkliar's novel was a symbol of struggle against the pro-Russian Yanukovych regime, or that of Pavliuk's novel attests the cultural resistance of Ukrainians during the wartime. And maybe here I'll stop. I thank you for your attention, and I hope you'll ask me something about our popular fiction and popular culture. Thank you very much.